In 1964, the Air Force started testing a futuristic aircraft, a massive InterContinental bomber. It was an incredibly fast bomber, outrunning fighter jets and riding its own shockwave. Intended as the future of America's bomber force, the journey to develop this advanced machine faced tragic setbacks. Let's learn about the XB-70 Valkyrie, America's Mach II super bomber. In the mid-1950s, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were in a tense standoff. The U.S. had advanced bombers like the B-52 and upcoming B-58, but they weren't ideal against Soviet defenses. The B-52 was slow, and the B-58 had limited range. The Air Force needed something new, a heavy bomber fast enough to outpace Soviet interceptors. However, in 1955, many doubted if such a plane was possible. Some radical ideas were considered, like using nuclear power or special fuels. The initial plan involved a subsonic flight with a supersonic dash after shedding outer parts of wings and fuel tanks. But thanks to rapid advancements in aviation technology, a design for a plane that could cruise supersonically throughout its mission emerged. Thus, the Air Force started working on a new generation of bombers in 1957. Furthermore, the performance goals were lofty. It would need to reach altitudes of 25,500 feet, travel at a speed greater than 3 times that of the B-52, and possess a payload and range comparable to the latter. Prominent manufacturers of aircraft, Boeing and North American Aviation, were asked to submit designs for competition. North American and Boeing offered extreme designs that superficially shared similarities. Both have thin delta wings designed for supersonic flight and canards. However, most people anticipated Boeing to win. After all, during the Second World War, they had constructed the legendary B-52 and a number of other notable bombers. The underdog was North America. However, their engineers discovered research during development that would provide them with a significant edge. A little-known study that described compression lift in detail. Shockwaves usually go away from an airplane when it is traveling faster than the speed of sound. However, the shockwaves would contribute to producing more lift if they could be channeled beneath the wings. North America's submission claimed to fly more effectively at high supersonic speeds by utilizing this approach. And it wowed the Air Force. Boeing was shocked to learn that North America's design had been chosen for development in 1957. The new bomber would be dubbed B-70 and given the name Valkyrie. Modern technology was employed by engineers to create a 260-ton bomber that was faster than a fighter plane. 6 afterburning turbojets were fed air through an advanced intake system in order to accomplish this. To operate most efficiently at high supersonic speeds, the engines were tuned. Furthermore, they were strong enough to let the Valkyrie to continue operating at Mach III and finish its mission even in the event that one failed. Performance was also greatly aided by ingenious aerodynamics, as the Valkyrie's compression lift allowed it to have one of the greatest lift-to-drag ratios of any piloted aircraft. Wings with variable shape increased compression lift and stabilized the aircraft. Takeoffs and landings may be performed with full extension, 25 degrees of downward inclination at low supersonic speeds, and a full 65 degrees at multi-Mach speeds. However, flying at 3 times the speed of sound will result in such high kinetic heating of the airframe that ordinary aircraft aluminum would weaken. Engineers created a novel fuselage covering and routed gasoline throughout the airframe to cool the aircraft's interior. Even at a height of 75,000 feet, the Valkyrie's cockpit was completely pressurized and had an ingenious encased escape mechanism. It meant that the bomber's 4-person crew wouldn't have to wear heavy flight suits, allowing a Valkyrie crew to take off in under 20 minutes. The Valkyrie's performance was absolutely incredible, with the ability to deliver a nuclear warhead anywhere in the world in a few hours. And the bomber would represent America's approach of deterrence via might. The first experimental XB-70 prototype was shown in May 1964, with flight testing to commence in the next few months. And it would soon be joined by a second and third prototype, both of which were already under construction. However, it was evident from the start that things would not go as easily. There were so many technical problems during the early ground testing that the maiden flight was delayed for months while engineers worked through a laundry list of faults. The XB-70 wouldn't be ready for its first flight until September 21st. Cheers filled the air as a space-age bomber lifted off on its maiden flight. Yet the celebration was brief. A hydraulic leak prevented the landing gear from retracting, and shortly after, one of the engines overheated, leading to an unplanned stop. As the prototype returned for a landing, a brake locked, causing a tire to blow up and catch fire. It appeared that as soon as one problem was handled, another would develop. On October 12th, the XB-70 then crossed the sound barrier for the first time. It just barely went above Mach I. However, as the flying testing developed, paint started coming off the fuselage and control surfaces, and the aircraft appeared to have been sandblasted. Fixing the paint, the XB-70 kept on accelerating, but the faster it flew, the deeper the issues seemed to get with each test flight. The prototype broke a horizontal splitter when Mach 2.6 was reached on the 12th test flight, and the piece was sucked into the engine duct, causing 4 engines to go off. All engines had to be changed, but the pilots made a safe landing. The airplane was finally given the all-clear to attain Mach 3 on October 14th. However, the wing's leading edge fell off in a big way after just 2 minutes, necessitating yet another emergency landing. After that, the initial prototype could only fly at a speed of Mach 2.5. There would inevitably be obstacles in the way of creating such a cutting-edge aircraft. However, a far more serious issue was hanging over the show. From the start, there were considerable concerns about whether the Valkyrie would be truly secure from Soviet air defenses, because surface-to-air missiles, developed in the mid-1950s, swiftly became the most effective option to protect airspace. By the 1960s, the Soviet Union possessed hundreds of them, capable of hitting targets far beyond the height of the XB-70. The development of ICBMs in the late 1950s also made nuclear bomb delivery considerably faster and more cost-effective. In just a few years, missile advancements rendered the world's most sophisticated bomber nearly obsolete. With the XB-70's strategic worth being seriously questioned, engineers hurried to find methods to keep the bomber relevant, drawing up bold plans to convert the bomber into a missile launcher, an airborne launch platform for spacecraft, or even a supersonic aerial refueler. Even more bizarre was the proposal to convert the bomber into a Mach III supersonic transport. However, these thoughts proved to be a bridge too far, and the mission was drastically pared back, finally reducing it to a bare-bones research study comprising only 2 aircraft. But with millions already spent on development, the initiative pressed onward. In 1966, NASA joined the Air Force in flight testing, utilizing the prototypes to do crucial research on supersonic flight. By that time, the second prototype had proven to be a far more competent aircraft. On May 19, 1966, it achieved speeds greater than Mach 3, proving its potential to cruise at 3 times the speed of sound for 30 minutes. After over a decade of development, one of the world's most ambitious airplanes has finally met expectations. But catastrophe struck only weeks later. On the 8th of June, the second prototype was joined by 4 additional aircraft for a formation flight picture opportunity. However, minutes into the flight, one of the trailing aircraft crashed with the XB-79, completely destroying it and badly injuring the Valkyrie's vertical stabilizers. For 16 seconds, the Valkyrie flew straight and level before falling down to Earth. In a matter of seconds, 2 test pilots and a billion-dollar plane were sadly gone. It was a terrible defeat for the program, forcing NASA and the Air Force to continue research using the far less competent initial prototype. The XB-70 was a feat of engineering. It also made a significant contribution during the Cold War, even though it was never included into the U.S. bomber force, because the Soviet Union hurried to create something equal when they discovered, in 1955, that the Americans were working on a supersonic long-range bomber. And in the end, it would rank among the most intimidating-looking aircraft ever constructed. But appearances may be tricked. To rival the Americans, the Soviets ultimately produced a disgraceful mess, one they would conceal for many years.